Good morning. Welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Martha, and today we are going to be talking about cooking from scratch. Excuse me, there's a hair on my face. What does that mean? So cooking from scratch, we all, or most of us know, not everybody does, that means cooking from ingredients. So I want to talk about the ingredients part of cooking from scratch today. So a lot of people ask me, where do I start? It can feel a little overwhelming, like, do I have to be a chef right away? Well, my answer to that question of where do we start is very, very simple. We're going to start with our pantry because there's a lot of overwhelming things. You can go to try to make a recipe and you're like so excited, but then you realize you don't have half of the things that you need. So let's just go and start with a few basic things, and some of these are categories, and you're gonna have to do some research and figure out where or what you want to buy within each category. So we're going to start with the pantry. I'm going to be looking at my notes that I've made, and then I also have a few things for your fridge and your freezer. And so let's get started. Number one for the pantry items is oils. There are many different kinds of cooking oils, and each one of them have different uses. So you're going to want to do a little bit of research, but I would start with a couple basic oils and also make sure that you're doing research on what that oil is used for. For example, olive oil, you have to be careful not to cook it too high. So you'll want a high heat oil, a low heat oil. Just don't get overwhelmed and just do your research on each one of these categories. Next is flours. Flour is very, very important when cooking from scratch. Many things are made from flour. You can buy the most expensive flours. You can just start with whatever you can afford and start with some basics. You can always move up and ramp yourself up as you move forward in your cooking journey. Number three is sugars. You know that you cook a lot with sugar, even if it's just a small amount of sugar, and you can, whatever kind of sugar that you prefer, go ahead and start there and keep your budget in mind and start with what you can afford. Nobody has to go out and go broke stocking their pantry. That's silly. Just take it step by step, buy a few of these staples, pick a recipe, and get started. And I would suggest watching my next video, which will be a very good place to start your cooking from scratch journey by replacing some of the things that you would have in your pantry with things that you've made, so that way you don't have to buy boxed food or canned foods if you can help it. The next thing, number four, is yeasts. I bake a lot of bread and make a lot of bread type products that needs active yeast. And also I do make some bouillon powders that needs nutritional yeast. And a lot of people put nutritional yeast in a lot of different things just to add good proteins and good nutrients. Next, number five is oats. Cooking from scratch, I never really realized how much oats I would use. I try to eat a lower carb diet, so I do use oats, and I make oat flours, and I use them a lot. So oats is definitely up there. Spices. I would say branch out. Of course, you're going to want to start with salt and pepper and garlic and onion powder and a good seasoned salt. But branch out into those seasonings. Look at some of the recipes, and I would also suggest getting a cookbook that looks, like something that you would eat the food out of, and then just see what do they generally use. And don't forget spices for baking sweet things, because you will. You're going to make something sweet sometime, and you're going to open the cupboard and not have cinnamon, and that would not be fun. So just make sure you think about cooking and baking spices. Rice. There are many types of rice, and I try to keep a good amount of the different kinds of rice. So if a recipe calls for something, I have it on hand. Excuse me. The next one is pastas. Eventually, you're probably going to want to make your own pastas, but in the beginning, you might not be able to do that, and that's fine. Just buy box pastas or whatever you can afford. Next is dried herbs. Now, if you have a garden and you can grow herbs, that's great. You can dry them yourself. If not, you can buy them from the store or from a farmer's market or wherever you can source fresh herbs and dry them yourself, or you can just buy the ones at the grocery store that are already dried. Number 10 is vinegars. Vinegars are important. I don't use a lot of vinegar, but when a recipe calls for it, it's good to have the different vinegars on hand. And you can choose what kind of vinegars you want to keep. Dried beans. I use a lot of dried beans. I can't say like every week or whatever, but a lot of times, especially in the winter, it's nice to have dried beans or home canned beans on hand. Dried nuts and fruits, those are really, really good to have on hand for healthy snacks. Let's see, vanilla. Of course, eventually I'd love to make my own vanilla, but at the moment, that's not in my budget. So what I'm doing is I'm working really hard to replace some of the things that I spend the big bucks on, some pre-made things that I could make at home so that eventually I can save enough money to be able to make my own vanilla at home. And you can set those goals too. So if you see something, well, I'd really like to buy this, well, see what you can do in other places, stock up or make them yourself or whatever, so that way you can put aside a little bit of money later on down the road. And it goes the same for kitchen appliances, but that's a different video. Number 16 is broths. It's having a good stock, healthy stock or broth on hand is really good because they add a lot of flavor to soups and sauces and a lot of the things that you're going to make. Homemade broth, of course, is going to be the best, but there are ones that you can buy that are already bought or already that did not make sense, that you can buy that are already made that are really good for you to have good ingredients. And that's a good thing to learn how to do, is read the ingredients of things and of course start with what you can afford, just like I said a little bit ago. Sauces. Now, of course, sauces are important in scratch cooking. Learning to make your own sauces is really, really good too, because then you can control the ingredients that goes into it. There are a lot of things in store-bought sauce that you don't necessarily want in your food, and you can avoid that by making it yourself. And the next video is going to have some of the things that I'm going to make to replace some of the things such as sauces and broths and stuff like that that I used to buy at the grocery store that I no longer do, and I'm going to teach you how I do it. Baking soda and baking powder, you're going to use that a lot in a lot of different recipes, so that's good to have on hand. I like to keep honey on hand and other sweeteners. You can choose, that goes back to sugars, different kinds of sugars. I put honey right in there because it's a nice natural sweetener. Cocoa powder is a really good one to have on hand. You're going to use that probably in a lot of baking things if you like chocolate. And then I like to keep baking chips of different flavors in the pantry. I find that very nice when I suddenly have a sweet tooth and I want to make something, and I have those things already on hand along with my baking spices, and I can make many different things. So that was my 21 basic pantry staples. It started as 20, but I had a bonus in there. And now I have a few things that goes into like fridge and freezer. And so milks, a lot of, you're gonna, even if it's not dairy milks, different kinds of milks, whatever you drink on a daily basis or from time to time, buy those to cook with, because if you don't drink cow's milk, you wouldn't buy cow's milk to cook with. So buy what you drink to cook with. Cheeses, of course, there's many different kinds of cheeses, and you can choose what kinds you like to cook with, or look in your recipe book that tells you like what are some of the cheeses that are in the different recipes. I would stock a few of those on hand, as many as you can. And cheese freezes really well. If you shred it and freeze it, you can pull it right out and it's good to go. Eggs, if you have chickens, that's great. That's the only chicken I have right now. So I buy eggs in bulk because I use a lot of eggs. I eat a lot of eggs in the morning. I cook with eggs a lot. So eggs are important to have on hand. Raw meats, whatever meat you like to eat or that fits in your diet, I would see what you can do about having some of that in your freezers, so that way you can pull it out, and whatever recipe you have in front of you, you have your ingredients. You know, that's what keeping a stocked pantry is all about. Fresh and frozen vegetables. Of course, we all aspire to keep as many fresh veggies and fruits in our house as we can. Sometimes you have to freeze them or can them. Homemade is always best, but store-bought is good too. So lots of vegetables and fresh fruits. I put potatoes and onions separate from that because I think they're great to have, and carrots too, because you can store them for a really long time, and it doesn't take a lot to store them. So I would definitely keep those as staples on your or in your pantry. Butters, there are lots and lots of different kinds of butters. Margarines, butters, you know, grass-fed, whatever. You do your research and see what you want to go for, and of course in the beginning you just go by what you can afford. Then the last two kind of go hand in hand, and that is plain yogurts and sour cream, because they're interchangeable in some ways. So I would keep a tub of each one of those, and of course if you can make your own plain yogurt and keep that in your fridge, go for it. I have not done that yet, but keeping those on hand is good. And if you've made it all the way to the end of my 2 lists, you are a rock star. And I hope that you go down to the comments and leave me a heart and let me know that you stayed through the whole video. And I hope that you join me for the next one. As I said a little bit ago, the next video is going to be about some of the things that I no longer buy from the store that I make at home. And I'm not only going to tell you what they are, but I'm going to show you how I make them and give you recipes and pointers as we go along. And it's going to be, I'm not sure how many video series that's going to be, but we're going to continue and learn together. And I'm excited to join you on this journey, and I hope that you come back every week and join me and cook along, and we'll have a good time. Well, you have a great day, and thank you so much for joining me.